That night, I woke up suddenly, startled by a noise as if something heavy had been dropped in the kitchen. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a few seconds, I couldn't understand what was happening. The house was too quiet, even for this place. I lay in the darkness, straining to hear every sound, and suddenly caught a barely audible noise, a door creaking downstairs. It was slow and cautious, like someone trying to move silently. A chill ran through me. I was sure I had locked the door before going to bed. I had moved into this house a week ago. It was old but cozy. The floorboards creaked under even the lightest step, and the walls groaned with each movement. At first, it was unsettling, but soon these sounds became part of the nightly silence, especially during cold autumn nights when the wind beat against the windows and howled through the chimney. Sleep had left me entirely, replaced only by fear and a clear sense of what was happening. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but the screen remained black. Its battery had died. Lying in the dark, I tried to convince myself that it could have been a draft, but the footsteps below shattered any remaining doubts. Someone was inside the house. I sat up in bed, trying to make no noise, feeling cold sweat trickling down my back. What should I do? If it were just a burglar, I might scare him off with noise. But at that moment, it felt like this intruder wasn't merely looking for something to steal. There was something unnaturally deliberate in those steps, as if he was relishing what was happening. Cautiously, I approached the bedroom door and cracked it open. The hallway was shrouded in darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight filtering through dusty window panes. The footsteps had stopped, but I knew that the person downstairs was still nearby. I carefully crept toward the stairs and peeked into the living room. There, near the window, stood a stranger. His silhouette was barely discernible in the dim glow of a nightlight. He was rummaging through my belongings, methodically placing them into a backpack. I froze, trying not to reveal my presence, but my heart pounded in my chest like a drum. The man suddenly paused and lifted his head, as if sensing that someone was watching him. I darted back into the shadows of the hallway, trying to breathe as quietly as possible. It felt like he could hear every breath, every heartbeat. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to figure out what to do next. Should I hide or try to escape? But the escape plan vanished when I heard his footsteps again. He was coming up the stairs slowly and cautiously, like a hunter who knows his prey is near. I dashed into the nearest room, an old storage closet under the stairs where I had stashed boxes. Locking myself inside, I tried to keep my breathing steady, making no sound. Soon, the footsteps halted right outside the door. I heard him pause and listen. The door handle turned slowly, but the door didn't budge. I had blocked it from the inside. He jiggled the handle a few more times, then, abandoning the attempt, he stepped back. I heard him muttering under his breath, "Where are you? Where are you hiding?" Then the footsteps moved away. I couldn't tell if he had left or was just lurking nearby, so I stayed put, trying to remain calm. But after a few minutes, I heard him again. This time in another room. He opened every door in the house, checked closets, peered under beds, and searched through storage spaces. I started to think that he would soon discover my hiding place. I needed to move while he was in another part of the house. Gathering my courage, I quietly opened the closet door and slipped into the hallway. As I passed by the bedroom, I caught a glimpse of his shadow flickering in the mirror, reflecting part of the living room. My heart clenched with fear when he suddenly stopped and turned in my direction. I bolted up the stairs to the attic. My hands shook as I struggled to open the hatch, but it finally gave way. I climbed up into the attic and slammed the hatch shut behind me, holding my breath. I knew this wouldn't hold him for long, but it bought me some time. From my hiding spot, I could hear him resume his search. His voice grew louder as he began speaking aloud, as if savoring the situation. "Think you can hide from me? I'll find you." The attic was cluttered with old, dust-covered things, and I hid behind several boxes, trying to blend into the surrounding darkness. Minutes passed, but it felt like an eternity. Then I heard him climb the stairs to the attic. The hatch creaked open with a loud groan, and for a moment the attic was bathed in the dim light from his flashlight. He slowly scanned the attic, pointing the beam into every corner until it lingered on the boxes where I was hiding. I froze, hoping the shadows were deep enough to conceal me. But the light suddenly halted, then slowly began to move toward me. I felt my legs buckle with fear, but at the last moment an unexpected noise from downstairs distracted him. It was my old alarm system, which inexplicably began to blare. The man turned his head, frustration clear in his eyes. He hurried downstairs, leaving the attic in darkness. I seized the moment, rushed to the hatch, closed it, and blocked it with an old metal bar. My head spun from fear, but I knew I had to hold out until morning. With the bar in place, the hatch wouldn't open easily, and I hoped the man would decide to leave, realizing he couldn't achieve what he wanted. I stayed on the attic floor until dawn, listening intently for any noise below, but I heard no more footsteps, no voice. It was as if he had never been there at all. When the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, I dared to go downstairs. The house was silent and empty. My things were scattered, and the marks on the floor confirmed that this was no figment of my imagination. I called the police, but when they arrived, they found no trace of the intruder. Yet I knew he had been there, that he had been trying to find me. Maybe I was just a toy in his nightmarish game. Now, I live with the constant fear that one night, as I lie in bed, I'll hear that whisper outside the door again, the soft footsteps and the creak of the handle. And then, I won't be sure if I can escape this time. When my parents announced they'd be away for the entire night visiting friends, I was thrilled. Finally, my friend Mike and I could hang out without any adults watching over us. We planned a night of movies, pizza, and, of course, all the jokes we could come up with when no one was around to stop us. As they left, my parents reminded me, as always, to lock all the doors and not to make too much noise before closing the door behind them. Mike arrived right after they left with a bag of chips and a bottle of Pepsi. We took everything to the kitchen and started chatting about what we'd do. Movies, video games, arguing over who the best football player was. All of it was fun, but soon we craved something more exciting, something that could really add a thrill to the night. "Hey," Mike said, biting his lip and narrowing his eyes playfully. "What if we try to summon some kind of demon? Just for kicks, you know. Maybe record it on our phones and post it online. Get some views." I rolled my eyes, but the idea was too tempting to dismiss outright. We pulled out our phones, searching for something like how to summon a demon at home, and started reading through articles and comments where people joked about various rituals. All the instructions seemed silly and ridiculous. Draw a circle with salt, recite this ancient incantation, light some candles. "Let's try this one," I suggested, laughing. "It's supposed to summon some benevolent spirit that grants wishes. What do you think? Should we give it a shot?" Mike laughed and agreed. We turned off the kitchen lights and lit a single candle. It all felt completely ridiculous. I drew a salt circle on the floor, trying not to chuckle, while Mike began whispering some gibberish incantation, attempting to make his voice sound mysterious. It was all just a game until it got genuinely creepy. As soon as Mike finished his playful words, the candles suddenly flickered and went out. We both froze, surprised by the sudden darkness that engulfed the kitchen. Of course, I immediately thought of logical explanations, maybe a draft, maybe the air, but my heart still raced. We turned the lights back on and saw that the salt circle on the floor had been disturbed, as if someone had lightly scattered it, though I was certain neither of us had gone near it after finishing the ritual. "All right, that's enough of this nonsense," Mike said with a nervous laugh. "Let's just watch a movie or something." We headed to the living room, trying to pretend that nothing strange had happened. But I noticed that Mike glanced over his shoulder as he walked down the hallway, and I could feel a slight tension in the air myself. We turned on the TV and started watching a movie, but the sound seemed oddly muffled, as if the walls of the house had thickened. Things got even stranger when we heard rustling in the hallway. It could have been anything, old, creaky house noises. But the footsteps we heard behind the wall were too clear, like someone moving across the floor in socks, carefully, almost silently. "Did you hear that?" I asked, hoping Mike would brush it off with something like, "Nah, it's just the pipes." But he looked at me with the same tension I felt, unable to come up with an explanation. We fell silent, listening to the sounds. The footsteps stopped, but something had shifted in the atmosphere of the house. The sense of lighthearted fun was gone, leaving only unease behind. "Hey, what if someone got into the house?" Mike muttered, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Are you sure all the doors are locked? I checked before they left." Everything was locked. We decided to check to make sure all the doors and windows were secure. As we walked down the hallway, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We reached the back door and froze. The door was slightly open. We were certain it had been locked, but now a gap in the doorway stared at us like a black void leading into the night. "This isn't funny anymore," Mike whispered. "We need to call the police." I nodded and reached for my phone, but Mike quickly stopped me. "Let's close the door first. Keep it quiet. Who knows, he might still be inside." I crept towards the door slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. Just as I reached out for the handle, something flickered in the darkness outside. I slammed the door shut in terror and locked it tight. We returned to the living room, trying to figure out what to do next. Mike said he thought he heard someone going up the stairs, but I hadn't heard anything. We tried to convince each other that it was all in our heads, but deep down we both knew someone was in the house. We could feel it, and then came the creak on the staircase, slow and deliberate. It wasn't the sound of our steps or the old wood. It was something else, coming from someone moving slowly up the stairs. Mike grabbed a kitchen knife and I did the same. We hid in a corner of the living room, listening to the footsteps getting closer. I tried to hold my breath, but the sense of someone approaching overwhelmed me with fear. The footsteps stopped directly above us on the second floor, and then everything went quiet again. We stood in complete silence, too afraid to move. Then Mike whispered into my ear, maybe we should try to escape through the backyard. But then we heard a soft whisper coming from the staircase. It was a cold, unclear voice saying something incomprehensible. It seemed to relish our fear. We ran back to the door, but just as we reached it, there was a creak from above. Someone had started descending again. This time faster, more confidently. We rushed back to the living room and hid inside a closet, trying not to make a sound. Through the crack of the closet door, I saw a shadow move across the living room. The figure slowly circled the room, pausing by the window, then moving towards the door. We held our breath, praying it wouldn't hear us. But it seemed to sense our presence. I saw it stop in front of the closet, its breathing growing louder. It slowly reached for the door, but just then, a noise came from outside, the sound of my parents' car alarm. The figure flinched, then quickly disappeared from the living room. We stayed hidden in the closet, not daring to come out. When my parents returned and found us trembling in the closet with knives in our hands, we couldn't immediately explain what had happened. The police they called didn't find any signs of a break-in, except for the back door being opened. But I still feel like that person is out there somewhere watching me from the shadows when I'm alone, and every creak in the night makes me relive that terrifying night all over again. Liza and I had always dreamed of owning our own home. When we finally had the chance to buy a small old house on the outskirts of town, it felt like a gift from fate. The house seemed perfect. Wooden walls, a spacious garden, and a quiet neighborhood. The owner sold it for an unexpectedly low price, but we didn't think twice. We were too caught up in our dream. And why would we have any doubts? Our first night was spent among boxes, without furniture, on a mattress spread out right in the living room. It was a quiet, cozy evening, and we drank wine, enjoying the feeling that this was finally our home. But even then, I noticed that Liza kept glancing at the windows as if something was bothering her. "Did you hear something?" I asked, trying to hide my irritation. She just shook her head and forced a smile. "No, I just imagined it. I guess I'm still not used to the new place. Maybe it's just the old house, creaking." I chuckled, not giving her words much thought. But even then, I felt a slight chill run down my spine. The second night was worse. Liza woke up in the middle of the night and shook me awake, her eyes wide open, her breathing erratic. "I heard a voice," she whispered, clutching my hand. A woman's voice. She was calling my name. I listened, but there was only dead silence around us, with just the wind whispering through the tree branches outside. I hugged her and tried to calm her down, but a troubling thought flashed through my mind. Liza was never easily spooked. She was always the skeptic, and her panic worried me. That night, neither of us managed to fall back asleep. Days went by, but the house didn't feel any more welcoming. Liza became more withdrawn, often locking herself in the bedroom with the curtains drawn, avoiding the sunlight. I tried to support her, assuring her that she just needed rest, that all this was just stress from the movie. But I too began noticing strange things. Footsteps in the hallway that would stop whenever I went to check. Cold patches of air in the most unexpected places, a knocking in the walls that seemed to come from within. One night, when I woke up to find Liza not in bed, I found her in the living room. She was standing in front of a large mirror left by the previous owners, staring into emptiness. "Liza," I called out, but she didn't respond. I walked closer, and finally she turned to me. Her face was blank, as if all emotion had drained out, leaving only a shell behind. "She doesn't want us to live here," Liza whispered. I shuddered. "Who is she, Liza? This is nonsense." "Look, you're just exhausted." But Liza didn't take her eyes off the mirror. "The woman who lived here before us. She can't leave. She's here, and she hates me." That was the end of our conversation. Liza went back to bed, leaving me alone in the living room. I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. The house that was supposed to be our refuge was turning into a nightmare. The next day, I decided to learn more about the house's past. At the local library, I found an article about a woman who had lived there before. Her name was Marina, and she had died under strange circumstances. Neighbors found her body in the basement after they realized they hadn't seen her for weeks. No one knew how she died, but rumors said she was odd, a little obsessed. I didn't tell Liza what I'd discovered, hoping it was just a coincidence and not wanting to fuel her fears. But each day her condition worsened. She said she felt touches when she was alone in a room, that someone was watching her through the walls. I didn't know how to help her, and then I started seeing things too. One night as I was climbing the stairs, I thought I saw a woman's figure in the darkness of the hallway. I froze, my heart pounding wildly. I stared into the darkness, but there was no one there. However, when I went to the mirror in the living room, I clearly saw fingerprints on its dusty surface, as if someone had run their hand across the glass. We tried to avoid being home during the day, leaving for work early and returning late, but every time night fell, the house swallowed us into its darkness. Liza became almost unrecognizable. Her face grew gaunt. Her eyes were always red from crying and lack of sleep. She started avoiding me as if she thought I was part of the threat. But the breaking point came one evening when I came home and found her standing at the entrance to the basement. She was holding a knife and muttering something under her breath. "Liza, what are you doing?" I tried to take the knife from her, but she pushed me away. "She says I have to leave, or else she'll take me." I grabbed her by the shoulders and tried to shake her out of it, but she broke free and screamed. It was a desperate scream filled with terror and pain. I stepped back in horror, not knowing what to do. She fell to her knees, pressing her hands to her ears as if trying to block out voices only she could hear. The next morning I couldn't take it anymore and called her parents, begging them to come and help. We decided that Liza would move in with them for a while to recover, but when they arrived, Liza refused to leave the house. She clung to the doorframe, screaming that if she left, she would come after her. Left alone, I tried to bring some order to the house, to get rid of the things left by the previous owners. I went down to the basement and began sorting through boxes. Among the old belongings, I found a diary that belonged to Marina. I opened it randomly and saw pages filled with fear and madness. She wrote about feeling someone's presence in the house, that shadows wouldn't leave her in peace, that she was being forced to stay. The last entry was chilling. "They say I will never leave, that now this is my home forever." I snapped the diary shut, feeling a cold grip tighten around my heart. When I returned to the living room, I saw Liza standing by the mirror again, staring at her reflection. But this time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "I can't stay here anymore," she whispered. I hugged her, and at that moment, we decided to leave the house for good.